Kirby, this is going to be an awesome interview, not only because I like talking technology, but I am a long suffering Pistons fan who loves talking about basketball. I will not say anything more about them, I promise. Thank you so much for joining. And let's start with the journey of, just kind of basketball and tech.
Yeah, of course. So my journey starts right in it. I played basketball growing up, played at Harvard for my 4 years in college. And anytime I talk about my journey and what I'm doing today, I always talk about how much being an athlete shapes a lot of who you are. It guides a lot of your decisions. And even after sports, too, it guides a lot of your passions and how you think about your career. And playing basketball at Harvard was absolutely that for me. I got my start in sports business there, doing a lot of internships between our summers. So I interned with the Patriots, with Under Armour, and eventually did my last internship at PepsiCo, which kind of taught me about the importance of building like real, tangible, transferable skill sets that I could then transfer across the world of sports. So I started my career in marketing at PepsiCo right out of school. I was on the Mountain Dew brand team. I was on the sports marketing team, and really just got such a great training ground and brand marketing and athlete partnerships and sports partnerships. But during that time too, started to bring a lot of my experience as an athlete into the business world. I started a podcast outside of work called Court to Corporate, which is all about that journey that I was going through, going from playing basketball my whole life, playing at Harvard, to now being in the corporate world. And I'm like, what do I do? Who am I? How
Yeah.
do I figure this out? And so that podcast was like a manifestation of that, literally figuring it out as I was learning from other athletes that I was interviewing. But it also taught me a lot about the importance of content creation, brand building, and just kind of how the landscape of athlete marketing was going to eventually transform. So fast forward 2 years later, I joined Will Ventures, an early stage sports venture capital firm. I was fourth hire, first marketer, helped build the marketing for that firm's launch, and really just got to see this new world, this new career path of startups and venture capital. And during that time, lots of change was happening again with athletes, NIL rule changes, women's sports,
Hmm.
emerging technologies coming into the world of athletes. And I got that idea going again. I'm like, wait a minute, how does this now apply of empowering athletes, but in this space of technology and innovation? And that's kind of the basis of New Game Labs, which I know we'll get into.
Yeah, my question, like to start, would be, did you always know where you wanted to go post basketball, or was that kind of an evolution?
It was an evolution. I always knew directionally I wanted to be in sports business, but sports business is so broad. There's so many
Yeah.
angles and avenues that you can approach to be in the space and have an impact on the space. But content really helped me figure it out. Like starting court to corporate, I was able to interview a bunch of athletes, a lot of them which were in sports business. So that was a learning journey. I put a lot of research into building that podcast of studying what are athletes doing in the business world and
Hmm.
learning about the venture capital world before I was even in it. So I think like being proactive about what you want to do once you know the direction is a really great way to figure it out.
And then, like, in interviewing, I can relate to this too, but in interviewing all those athletes and people in sports business, did they reinforce your hypothesis? Did they challenge your hypothesis? How did that evolve when you kind of got direct feedback?
Yeah, I think it was definitely a process of like validating that there was a problem to solve. So the problem to solve when I started Court to Corporate was athletes lacked, the amount of infrastructure at scale that they needed to succeed in the business world. And we were
Hmm.
seeing all that was happening with like the 2% of professional athletes that go into play pro. They're launching media companies, they're doing all these amazing things, but my question was, how does that apply to the 98% that don't go pro? An athlete like me that, played basketball or
Hmm.
sport their whole life, played at a very high level. What
Yeah.
do we do? How do we continue to build our brands and leverage the equity of being an athlete in the business world? So interviewing, like I was in New York at the time, I was going to my friends' places on the weekend after work, going to interview them. And I heard a lot of the same things. They were also feeling
Mm-hmm.
the same thing. So I feel like it was a way to like quote unquote build in public before I knew what that was, of like validating that okay, there's something here. But also understanding that things change. And so that problem to solve isn't the same as it is today because NIL has come into the market. And so
Mm-hmm.
now athletes are able to build their brands so much earlier. They're able to monetize their brand so much earlier. They're able to get business experience so much earlier. So just even what is going through an athlete's mind has changed a lot just in like 3 years.
And I thought that was going to be one of the most fascinating parts about this conversation is just the ever-changing landscape there, which makes a ton of sense, right? I mean,
Mhm.
I'm glad we're at a place where we are, but that does mean that we will now have negative unintended consequences that will lead to more competition. If everybody's starting earlier, then they're all in the same place, right? So then it creates problems and opportunities on both ends.
Yes, I mean that's a great way to put it. It's like with new markets
Hmm.
come new problems to solve and new infrastructure that needs to be built and old lessons that need to be taught again. I think a lot of athletes that are building in the business space, a lot of us, if you read any of our interviews, you'll more frequently than not see us reference. I watched the ESPN documentary Broke, which profiled
Yes. Whew.
athletes going broke, and that inspired me to do XYZ. And that the same thing happened for me too. I watched Broke, and then like right after that, I watched like the first season of Kevin Durant's Boardroom, which was on
Yep.
ESPN at the time, and I was like, whoa, like how did that change? Like how did athletes
Hmm.
go from being portrayed as broke into having a special content series about the business world and they're leading it. So
Hmm.
what happened in between then and there? Um, but I think with the NIL rule changes, I view it as overall positive. But it's like, how do we, teach those same lessons about financial management, about brand management, about thinking about life after sports, even though these opportunities are presenting themselves.
Yeah, and you brought up, and it was like early in the conversation, but you brought up like different places where you were, taking internships, and I think that I'm again my hypothesis is that the diversity of those different organizations each gave you a different lesson. I mean, you honed in on PepsiCo, but each one of those probably gave you a different feel and experience, right?
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. Patriots work sports marketing at a team.
Yep.
Under
Yep.
Armour, sports marketing at a brand. PepsiCo was actually just marketing when I first started. I was eventually placed on the sports marketing team, but it was just marketing. And I think it helped me, at Harvard, like everyone kind of went into like consulting, finance, like very
Hmm.
defined tracks because we're all taught like build transferable things that you can apply, kind of what I said at the beginning of the conversation. But I'm
Right.
such a passion driven person. I was like, no. I'm going to do something that I genuinely enjoy and like love the process of because then I can get really good at it. And so for me, like I studied sociology in college, and I see a lot of what I studied and what I do today. Like, my newsletter is like basically like publishing, like conducting research, connecting dots, studying how past things apply to present things, and like predicting the future. And like that's a lot of what my interpretation of like what I gained from studying sociology. I think a lot of that you see it in like brand building as well. It's like, okay, let's study
Absolutely.
these consumer trends, let's study these market trends. Where's the gap? How are we going to position our brand? Where are we predicting the space is going, and how do we win? So I think you can apply themes of what you're doing. But playing basketball at Harvard was very unique in the sense of we had summers off in the Ivy League, so we were training, but like I didn't have to be in Boston, so I could go to Baltimore to intern
Mm.
at Under Armour. I could go to New York to intern at PepsiCo. So something I share with a lot of student athletes that may not be in that same situation is how can you use NIL to build your resume? So when you're
Yes.
partnering with brands, don't just worry about am I getting this brand check or not. How Let's flip it to something on your LinkedIn. Like let's talk about how
Hmm.
you're getting experience in partnership marketing. Like, like let's connect the dots and then also use content as a resume builder because that is my biggest learning from my career is that like so much of the opportunities that I get are not from applying on a website. It's from I'm publishing consistently on LinkedIn for years, and someone's coming to me and saying, "Hey, I saw you publish this. Are you interested in this? Would this be cool to you?" So I think there's ways that even if you're not able to do those internships directly, that you can still build up your career in a way as an athlete.
I think the really interesting thing, like if you view NIL, which it is, right, as a finite resource, right, you are only going to have it for this amount of time,
Mhm.
then, and I don't think I've ever really heard it, in the context that you're expressing, but it is true that if you view that as a finite resource, then you should maximize not just the monetary potential of it, but whatever is the future 10-year, 20-year, 30-year potential of what that can be. And so, all things being equal, if two things give you the same monetary value, but one gives you an exponential greater value in what you can do going forward, obviously there's your choice, right?
Yeah, that's a great way to
Yeah.
put it. It's a really good way to put it.
No, I mean that's
Zoom out.
there's just there's fascinating nuance to it, right? I live in Michigan, so Blake Corum obviously put a lot of it into real estate, and I was like, yes, like
Right.
you could just see it was fascinating. I was just really happy to see it. Like I'm just happy to see somebody who's like a sophomore in college, and they're already like, yeah, I'm getting this, and then I'm putting it into real estate, and then I've got this, and then this and this, and then it's all whole thing. I'm like,
Right.
yes, how it should be and how it's intended. But talk to me a little bit. Okay, so you get all this experience. You were in all these organizations. When does the light bulb go off for New Game Labs?
Hmm. Yeah, I would say it was like an evolution. Like I could
Yeah.
say it went off when I started Court to Corporate because that was like the first inspiration of like, okay, I'm starting my career in this thing, but I know this is where I want it to go. And so just being attentive along the way of like gathering data points of what are things that inform that thesis of how do I empower athletes at scale. Okay, I'm getting marketing experience, I'm getting sports marketing, I'm getting venture capital marketing, I'm getting experience in studying emerging trends. And so it's that compilation of all of those things. But I would say two big factors really stood out. I would say the growth of the creator economy,
Mm-hmm.
really during like 2020 pandemic and creator economy shifting from like influencer marketing to like creator businesses and seeing more tangible examples of how creators are building businesses that are bigger than their personal brand. And then two, I would also say that amount of innovation around the athlete, like seeing NIL happen and being like, this doesn't come around often in sports. Like this
Mm-hmm. No.
generational change in sports of now millions of athletes are able to tap into their economic potential. Like, okay, like that doesn't happen that often. And so I would say it's a combination of those two things. And with creator businesses, like so when you study creator businesses, you frequently see they all have an anchor platform. And frequently it's like a YouTube, a TikTok, Instagram, Twitch, a lot of these platforms that have been around for a while and perceived as creator platforms. But my thing was LinkedIn, and I didn't really see any examples, but I'm like, maybe this is like a differentiator. And at the time,
Yep.
LinkedIn had launched their first creator accelerator. I shot my shot. I was like, I'm gonna pour it all on the line. I'm gonna share the big vision for New Game Labs. I'm saying it's gonna be this big thing, and like just put it out there. I got accepted, and that was like literally the start of my business. And since then, I've continued to double down on LinkedIn, understanding that content is my ability to share stories, to publish great content is my biggest differentiator. So even as my vision expands, even as different business opportunities present themselves, I always remind myself to like get the fundamentals right. Like you're
Mm-hmm.
really good at this, just like a podcaster is really great at podcasting, a YouTuber is really great at YouTubing, and you have to continue to do the thing that makes all the other wheels turn, like that opens the door to consulting, that opens the door to partnerships and all these different things. So I think since starting, even like LinkedIn has transformed so much. Like now
Yeah.
there's a lot of people that are building on LinkedIn. So that goes that light bulb again of all right, how do we continue to differentiate?
And everything shifts, right? I think the constant, right? You're spot on. And I want to get back to it in a second. Of like, there has to be a core platform, but also you're spot on that it's just momentum. You have to be constantly in the creator economy. You have to be constantly creating momentum because that leads to other opportunities. That leads to more networking leverage. There's a lot of different things.
Yep.
What's always funny to me is people will ask about podcasting and they'll be like, why are there so many podcasts that also simulcast video on YouTube? Like, I don't want to sit and watch a
Mhm.
podcast for like it feels weird, right? But
Yeah.
it's because the algorithm it's much easier to be found in search in YouTube than it is to be found in search for any audio based platform. So I
Yep.
mean, if anybody ever listening wonders why that is occurring, it's not necessarily because it's the best content form for it. It's best for search. If
Mm-hmm.
things change, then maybe that will change. The first person we ever had on this podcast did what you did and looked at Snapchat in specific and went,
Wow.
that's my differentiator. That's the
Yeah.
place where they're offering the most money, and that's where the creators have somewhat left and go onto other platforms. Therefore, I have an advantage. Same thing with LinkedIn. And then as you're getting to, it changes.
Hmm.
And then people go around. For those not familiar, give a breakdown of New Game Labs.
Yeah, so New Game Labs, creator-driven company connecting athletes and technology through media and partnerships with big companies like Meta and LinkedIn, and also startups across the world of sports, media, entertainment. Common theme with a lot of those startups is that they have applications for athletes. So whether it's like a creator platform for athletes, or a data analytics tool for athletes, or it's founded by an athlete, as a part of my brand, I ensure that there's a common thread that ties back to the mission of empowering athletes in this world of tech and innovation. So that's the basis of it. And, really on the content side, it's such an iterative process. Even like I've tried a lot of different things. One thing that has stayed consistent is LinkedIn, and have tried podcasts, newsletters. I have such a soft spot for podcasting because like that's where I got my start, and I love talking to people.
Yeah.
But also speaking to things changing. I feel like newsletters have changed. Like the newsletter business opportunity has changed so much just even
Mm-hmm.
since starting, and now you see a lot more platforms of creator tools that help individuals launch newsletters, but also you see why it is such a great base for like
Yeah.
kind of building your library of content essentially. So the newsletter has been a big success, and always continue to evolve and iterate what that looks like.
It's interesting how like both the podcast and newsletter have had similar life cycles that they have, been around for a while to some, not been around for a while to others. The newsletter goes away, it comes back, it goes away, and now it comes back in full. Same thing with podcasts, right? Mid 2000s, it's a very exciting time to be in podcasts. Then it kind of wanes. Then mid
Mm-hmm.
2010s, it comes back with a vengeance. And now we're in an interesting time with podcasts where people are trying to figure out different monetization of them.
Mm, right.
Because you're not necessarily going to get a huge upfront deal. You're not necessarily going to sell a lot of Casper mattresses. So now it's figuring out what are the best partnerships in place, right? I think what's probably most interesting and most nuanced about what you're doing is that you are going to have to constantly be evolving with both the tech climate and the athlete climate, and these are it's like
Yes.
I love it for you and I don't envy it at the same time because I look at it and I go, there are so many opportunities, but those two things will never stay in constant relation for longer than 2 weeks.
Never, never.
Yeah.
But I mean, actually, so that's a great point. I would say it actually plays to my advantage because everyone's like, what's going on? And that is the value proposition of my newsletter. It's like I'll teach you what's going on. Like
There.
these are the trends. This is what's happening. This is what you need to know. These are what startups are doing. This is what athlete investors are doing.
Hmm.
So there's a lot going on. You just kind of have to be able to distill and really focus. I would even say I've had to tell myself to focus on what I'm doing multiple times because even in the athlete space, there are so many narratives and talk tracks that you can go down. Like like there's another world where this could be like an NIL newsletter. It could
Mm-hmm.
be a women's sports focus. Like there's so many different things. And I think really great content creators figure out like how do you create that blue ocean basically of like, okay, there's all
Yeah.
this happening. This is what I'm bringing to the table. And I think with, TikTok, YouTube, just like Instagram, like bigger creator platforms and like the consumer space, entertainment space, my favorite like description of creator brands is that like they all infuse like their personality and like what makes them very
Mm-hmm.
unique to what they're doing, and that sustains their differentiation. And so in the business space, you have to figure out how can you bring some of that, how can you not say what everybody else is saying and really infuse what is completely unique to what you're doing into your content.
Well, it's naturally leaning into your own strengths too, because if you know that if you're creating a lot of content, inevitably yourself will come out in it, and
Yes.
so you might as well embrace it, and you might as well feel genuine too. Because the other thing too, when you were talking about that, is if your nature is to be curious, right, then that is your advantage. If you're constantly curious about the space, then you're going to stay ahead of things, and then you're going to be able to deliver that information to people, right? That's your value prop. Good parallel would be any college coach right now that is not embracing NIL or not embracing the portal because you see the difference.
Mm-hmm.
Because and I don't want to name names, but if you see a program that hasn't done as well as they usually did in the last 2 or 3 years, it might be because of that.
Right.
And it's who's willing to adapt.
Mm-hmm.
And I've always
Yeah.
told people, and this is like my one thing: the second I stop being curious and I want to adapt, I should retire.
Mm.
I'm done. I'm
Yeah.
out. You
Yeah.
know, as a person in content and creator and person in PR, if I stop being curious and wanting to read about things, or curious how AI tools work, or somebody tells me about something and I just want to be like no, or I start putting the word the in front of that technology, I'm out.
So that's funny.
If I say the AI,
Yeah,
oh, I'm
it's a
done. I'm cooked. It's a wrap.
wrap.
But what makes you curious about this? I mean, obviously you've lived in the space, so you know it and you have a background, but what keeps you curious?
Yeah. One, I think it's a little bit of personality. Like I'm
Yeah.
just always excited to be learning new things, meeting new people, just that typical growth mindset type of thing where I'm just like, all right, like what else? What else? This is interesting. What else? Um, and I really do genuinely have a passion for helping other athletes. I always think about how much like sports has opened up doors for me, going to Harvard, being able to start at PepsiCo, work in venture capital, start a company. Like a lot of those things are rooted in my experience, brand, and network gained from being an athlete.
Mm-hmm.
And so, how can I help other athletes find that for themselves? It may not be in sports, it may not be in tech, it may not be in venture capital. It doesn't have to be any of those things. It could be in fashion, in music, whatever. But it's like if I can like help you find your version of success, like that lights me up inside. And so I think it's like a genuine passion to like figure out this problem that I'll never solve of like how do I keep doing it again and again and again.
Right.
So yeah, I think it's just like a combination of those two things. And also I think um, when you start something from scratch and you see it grow, like it's freaking
Mm.
awesome. Like
Yeah.
Court to Corporate was a Google slide deck that had no design on it. And then it grew into this really big podcast. New Game Labs was a Notion page. And then it grew into this. And I'm like, that's awesome. And I just love that process. And so I'm going to keep doing it.
Yeah. And I love the fearlessness of it doesn't have to be 100% perfect.
No,
Just throw the idea out there.
it's not.
I, I, it's very hard to meet people who are creators and perfectionists. It does exist. Don't get me wrong. There's absolutely a lane, right? But I think perfectionism can be in two ways. It's like perfectionism about the idea, and then perfectionism and just wanting to get every detail right. Those I think are two different things, and that's a little bit about confidence and shooting your shot, right? But when you were talking about what else, where do you want to see this grow? What do you have a defined lane where you want this to be, or are you just constantly adapting?
I have like a big picture North Star, which is the same thing of like, how do I continue to attack this problem or attack this passion of helping athletes in the business world? I think I have learned specifically through the process of entrepreneurship that things are always going to change. It's just always going to change. Actually, I take a step back. Career paths change. When I started my career, I didn't know about venture capital. I didn't know that in 2 years, the creator economy would be this big thing. The NIL rule changes were not in effect. Women's sports were not where they are today. So it's like
Mm-hmm.
things are always changing. But I think as long as you have a really tight thing that fuels you, like you can be able to adapt. So I think just even through building my company, I've learned to kind of not put myself in a niche. Like, yes, I'm in this niche of sports, athletes, but now I communicate athletes and technology. Before, when I had started, I would have said like athletes in the creator economy, or athletes in AI, or athletes in
Mm-hmm.
Web3,
Mm-hmm.
whatever it was at the time. But now it's this more expansive approach of all of these things that encompass like athletes and innovation. I can build within that because I built a brand that represents something bigger than a trend at the time. So I think that has been like a biggest learning for me. So to answer your question, I am more so in the camp of like evolve,
Mm-hmm.
evolve. Like
Yeah.
have a plan, but evolve.
Yeah, you provide immediate value, but you're always constantly considering and evaluating what that value will be going forward.
Exactly.
Um, yeah, I'm fascinated by the space, but I'm also when you were talking about, I think there's this immediate impulse for a lot of people to narrow the scope as much as possible because they want to make that the differentiator, right?
Yeah.
And then you quickly realize, oh crap, I am now stuck there. And so the balance of the more broad, the more ways that you can engage with different audiences, the more people that you can bring, because obviously nothing can be done on your own. It takes investors, backers, community, people, contacts, media, all these different entities to make things happen. So the more expansive you make something, the more opportunities you give it. I applaud you on
Yes.
that. That
Yeah.
is awesome. Current state of women's college basketball. How do you feel?
I feel great. I feel
Yeah.
like it's up to the right. Yeah. Like, yeah, I mean, the data is the data. The data is there. If you're listening to this, please just go type in like women's basketball growth facts or something. Like it's amazing. The talent is there. The investment is there. And I just think that, women's basketball, women's soccer are like definitely like leading a lot of
Hmm.
growth in women's sports and the marketability of it, the players, all these things. So I'm excited to see how that just continues to build.
I'm excited narratively too for women's college basketball because I think it exists in this really interesting space where players stay longer. You
Mm-hmm.
have narratives, you have rivalries, you have what used to exist in the 80s in college basketball where you have juniors and seniors playing against each other. So, when, Angel Reese and Haley Van Lith potentially play against a Caitlin Clark or a Juju Watkins or, whoever the case may be, this, this builds over time, right? You can hopefully have and I think that's I don't want to say that's all of it. And it's my hypothesis is part of it is that people have just gotten really tired on the men's college basketball side of like, I'm rooting for laundry and I don't even know who's on this team. And by the time I figure out who's on this team, they've already left this team. And so it's really hard to care where, if you know the background and the storyline of 2 seasons ago, right? And you follow South Carolina or you're excited about what's going on in the Pac-12 right now because it's the last year.
Mhm.
Like, there are a lot of interesting storylines that you can get into. For anybody who does not follow women's college basketball, I would implore you to get into the storylines because they're good, and they're like WWE good, and they're not even written. They're just happening. Like, they're just happening naturally.
Yep, absolutely.
Um, all right.
Yeah,
Kirby, when we finish these, I do something called keep it short. It's 3 questions. The questions are short. Your answers can be however long you want them to be. We are not on a shot clock. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Okay. Question 1, your favorite moment in your own athletic career?
My senior weekend, so it's like your last home games ever. We won both games, and my family was there. My best friends surprised me and came into town, and then one of my favorite R&B artists had a concert that Sunday. So
Mm.
it was the best weekend ever.
Yeah, kind of a just a culmination. Everything went well, having everybody
Everything
around.
went well.
That's
Life
awesome.
was great. It still was great.
Um, Question 2, technology as it relates to this industry and our discussion that you are paying the most attention to, most excited about, most curious about.
Mm.
And it's an
Um,
exceptionally broad question
I
on purpose.
would say newsletter platforms and how athletes will be leveraging them. Like I just think about how Beehive has like come on the scene and is just doing such a
100.
great job of like getting people behind their product and their journey and launching all these features and all these things. And you see a lot of athletes thinking about newsletters as well. So I think there is a synergy there to be had.
To bring it full circle, this is the first in 40 some odd episodes of this podcast that we've talked about newsletters. So when you
Really?
want to talk about, yeah, but it's something that we live every day and we talk about because we have a large one. And so it's funny because when you start talking about underrated platforms, right? Think about where it's easy and accessible. Think about where other people aren't, and how can you scale quickly, and
Yes.
especially as it relates to what you're doing, because yes, you get a large burst of attention very quickly, and you basically, that's the thing for a lot of these athletes, right? You're going from 0 to 100 really quickly, and then for 99% of them, you're also going from 100 to 0. And so
Hmm.
it's how do you capitalize on that apex and then
Yep.
sustain it.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Absolutely.
uh, Question 3, it's 15 years from now, what are you doing?
Oh my gosh. Um, I'm a multi hyphenate still,
Yeah,
so
because
I'm
it
not going
really,
to answer.
no, that I honestly, that the fact that the fact that there's clarity in that answer tells me everything, right? Because again, if at your core you are just a curious person who wants to connect dots, that's where you'll be. The other, like, there's like a sadness and a happiness when you're a dot connector, because there's this, that you will always be doing that, and you will also know that you will never stop having to do that because there will always be more dots to connect.
Exactly.
Basically, the more things, it's like a never ending puzzle, and that you just, once you solve this, you've now it becomes larger. It never stops. um, I think I just scared everybody away from entrepreneurship. I took it to a dark place. But it's again, that's why it requires but that's why it requires the passion, the curiosity, and the commitment to want to do that. Otherwise, you're gonna want to stop doing that.
Exactly. It's always iterating. It's always iterating. Ask a founder on day one of their company, what does your company do? Ask them a year from then, and a year from then, and a year.
Mm,
In those first 5 years, it's going to like exponentially change. That's how I think.
I
I'm
agree.
not saying
That
for
makes
everyone,
uh,
but I think for creator businesses especially, it's going to exponentially change.
absolutely. Normally I just stop the whole podcast after 3 questions, but that made me want to just dig in a little deeper, and then we'll be done. But just your advice in general to people creating and building, businesses in the creator economy?
Yeah, I'll say for creator businesses, I would say my first piece of advice is to like not how do I say this? Um, like don't limit yourself to being a content creator. Like think about yourself
Hmm.
as an entrepreneur. There's a difference between like the skill set that you have and the business that you're going to build. So content creation is like your skill set. Okay, what business can you go build with that? I think when you separate those two things, you can think a lot bigger.
Yes.
Because if I had the thought content creation, I would just be posting on LinkedIn every day. But I'm like, content leads to what? I can build this
Hmm.
business that does multiple things. It's a brand that's not Kirby Porter. And it also opens me up to do other things because I'm not my business. I'm a big
Yes.
part of my business. I infuse my personality into my business, but there's also other parts of me. So that's my first piece. And then my second piece of advice is like people are not going to understand what you're doing for probably a long period of time until it works, and like it doesn't matter. Go make it
Correct.
happen. Go
I am
execute, and when it works, you're good.
I am 15 years into this, and my friends still are unclear. And I love it. If you
Yeah.
know, you know, and that's fine. And if you're my friends, I'm glad that you don't know. It's totally fine. I'm good with either. And I think your advice is pertinent too because of all the places that you were at and that you interned along the way. Because
Mhm.
PepsiCo doesn't view it as food and beverage. It's lifestyle. It's
Mhm.
it's more expansive.
It
Under
is.
Armour is not selling shirts and shoes. It is selling
Mhm.
lifestyle. It's selling more than that.
Yes.
Patriots sports teams do not view themselves as just what is on the court or on the field. They view themselves as a whole entertainment group. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So the more
Wow.
you open yourself up to
Yes.
possibility, look at that. We
Connecting.
landed the plane, right?
We did. I love it. I love it.
Kirby, thanks so much for joining.
Thank you. This is awesome. I appreciate it.
Easy.